What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Strength Coach Rants. I'm your host, Connor Lyons, and today we're going to be talking about the American youth sports business model.
I don't want to hear you, 'cause you cannot master the stress.
All right, so today we're going to be talking about the American youth sports business model and how we have all gone completely insane when it comes to our kids in sports. It's funny, we have more data available to us right now than we ever have in the history of the world, and it seems like we ignore it in lieu of chasing these insane dreams. And I'm not saying you shouldn't dream as an athlete. You should, aim for the stars and hope to get to the moon. But today we're going to go over how damaging this is, and all this year-round training and playing and sports specialization that we're doing is actually leading to you being less likely to make it to the next level. But before we get into all of that, just a couple things to go over. One, I've got a new podcast that I'm going to be putting out. It's going to be called The Great Strength Debate. And what I'm doing, I'm in the process right now of gathering a bunch of coaches who have some opinions on things, and we're going to be hashing it out live for everyone to see. I know in the sports performance and strength and conditioning and fitness world in general, there's a lot of egos. There's a lot of people who don't like to be questioned. Hopefully everybody can put that to the side so that they can come together and we can actually get some information out of some of these coaches, and maybe we disagree on some things, but we could find some common ground somewhere. So it's going to be coming in the next couple weeks. I've got a couple coaches already lined up to do it. I always do this at the end, but especially with YouTube, I feel like nobody watches till the end. So go buy a book. We have Total Hockey Training. We have the Dynamic Effort Method for athletes. They're still in Simple Strength. They're all still available on Amazon. Done some pretty decent numbers with the hockey book, more so than the other ones. But I got a very nice review from a guy by the name of Mike Hedleski. I don't know if he still holds it, but at one point he held the American record in the raw deadlift at like 800 plus pounds. But he said it was a great read. I broke down complex thoughts when it comes to like a West Side Influence template or a conjugate method very well. So if you're somebody who's interested in the conjugate method or a West Side Influence template, and maybe you've read West Side Barbell Book of Methods and you've struggled to understand what the hell Louis talking about half the time, go give that a read. I'll put the link in the comments. It's actually also on the KENP or the Kindle. It's like streaming. You can read it for free if you're a member. So go check it out. It's got some good information in it, along with Total Hockey Training and the Dynamic Effort Method for athletes. And check out The Great Strength Debate when that happens. I'll link it all in the description. Back to the insanity of what we've done when it comes to youth sports. So I made another video or episode on this called, I don't remember what it was called at this point. I will link it in the description because I do that with everything. But it's about the LTAD model and if the LTAD model is effective or not. I believe it's really not. But this business model we have when it comes to developing young athletes is anything but a development model. It is the worst thing to happen to sports ever in the history of the world, and I will die on that hill. It has become all about the money. These organizations and coaches and private coaches understand your pain points, which are your kid getting left behind, right? So they can sell you on spending this money now so that your kid is able to keep up and excel and possibly play at the next level. So we're going to start off with some numbers here, average numbers, and then we're going to get into the insane numbers that are averages, and it's really quite crazy. Here in the United States last year, we spent over $12 billion on youth sports. Now, that includes league dues, team dues, apparel fees, training, private skills training, travel, lodging, all that stuff. All in, Americans spent $12 billion, or a little over $12 billion, right? We are 40% of worldwide spending on youth sports, and we are a far cry from 40% of the world's population. We actually only have about 4% of the Earth's population. So we are spending more money than anyone else. And is it really is it panning out for us? Are we seeing the benefits of this, or are we just fattening the pockets of a lot of organizations and coaches? My money's on the latter. So to start this off, the average family, just across the board, right? We're talking like rec all the way up to super high level, super duper elite, whatever. All those families, all the money they spend, average out by the amount of families there are. We're at $890 per year. Now, that doesn't sound that crazy. That's not like a ton of money. That's, less than $100 a month for your child to go out and be active, right? That seems fairly reasonable. However, once your kid gets to a certain level of play, which is like at the higher end of the rec divisions, they're going to be approached by these organizations that want them to come play for them, right? And understand that there are some coaches with the best of intentions who really do want to see your kid do very well. I know plenty of them, right? But the business model is not designed for that. The business model is designed to extract as much cash from you as humanly possible by offering you all these crazy things, right? So if we're looking at $890 a year, that's like $17 a week. That's really not all that nuts. You could, it's cheaper than sponsoring one of those hungry kids in Africa, right? It's not all that much money, and it's great outcomes because your kid gets to make new friends, learn how to be part of a team, learn to possibly have to learn how to play a game from somebody that they don't like, because that happens often too, right? But after we get out of these rec divisions, we get into the insanity that is like club and travel. And so the only sport I didn't grab here, no, I grabbed all of them. So never mind. We're going to start off with volleyball. So if you're at the upper levels of volleyball, right, which is anything higher than rec at this point, and that isn't high school, on the lower end, the average family is spending somewhere around $8,000 a year. The upper end of the average, like the average of the upper end of what people are spending, is around $24,000 a year. That's a lot of money. When it comes to basketball, the lower end average is slightly less. It's about $7,000. And the upper end average is about $23,500, right? So it's almost kind of right in line with volleyball. Baseball comes next. The lower end is still right around $8,000 a month. So you're kind of seeing here $8,000 a month. $8,000 a year is about the average for like a higher level kid. That's like the bottom of the barrel. That's the least amount you can get out of it for, right? That includes travel, team dues, all that noise, right? About $8,000. And baseball on the higher end is about $28,000, right? And that's because baseball has all these showcases, and the kids that I work with that play during the summer, holy hell, I never see them because they are always gone at some showcase, all right? Softball is next, very similar to baseball, but the lower end average is about $200 less at $7,800. Soccer, the lower end is about $8,500 and the upper end is about $27,500, right? And we're talking yearly here. Lacrosse, a little bit more expensive. The gear gets a little bit more expensive, and so does the travel, especially if you're down here in Florida, because the sport just hasn't grown in the Southeast quite as much, so you're traveling all up in the Northeast. The Midwest, I don't know if lacrosse is big there, but it just recently has started getting big down here. So on the lower end, you're at like $9,500 a year. On the upper end, you're at $31,500, right? That is knocking on the average income from like 4 years ago before inflation like went through the roof. That is a lot of cash to spend on a sport. Ice hockey, the lower end, again, right around $8,000. I would say that's probably a grossly under. I would say it would be more in line with lacrosse. But the higher end, you're looking at $46,000 a year. And this isn't an exaggeration. I know families that have spent this. It's not all that out of the ordinary. It's not everyone, but there are absolutely people who spend this kind of cash, upwards of $50,000 a year, on their child playing ice hockey. Tennis, the lower end is $12,500. And again, that's because everything is like private instruction. You're not on a team unless you're playing for your high school. So you're paying these coaches to work with your kids however many hours a day. And tennis is one of those insane sports where kids play 4, 5, 6 hours a day. So you do the math. That's a lot of money. So $12,500 at the lower end. And then on the upper end, we're looking at $46,000 a year, which is almost $4,000 a month. That is wild. All right, so these are the numbers. Like, if you were to start playing when you're 12 at a quote unquote high level, right? Let's say hockey, you're a AAA hockey player and you're playing at 12U all the way up until you get up to 20U in hockey before you like typically go to college, right? And if you're like at 19, 20, you may be playing pay to play tier 3, which is not cheap, or you could be getting paid to play in the CHL. It's pretty varied. But this is what you would spend if your kid was like high level elite from 12 years old until they went to college. All right. So we did some math here. Volleyball, the lower end is going to be about $56,000 a year. The upper end is not a year. For that time period from 12U to college. The upper end is $168,000 for your child to play a sport. Basketball, the lower end is right around 50 grand. The upper end is right around 165 grand. Baseball, 56 at the low end, about 196 at the upper end. Softball, a little more at 56,400 on the low end, $196,000 at the upper end. Soccer, you're looking right around 60,000 on the lower end, about 193,000 at the upper end. Lacrosse, you're looking at 66.5 on the lower end, and on the upper end, almost $250,000 at $220,500 for your child to play a sport for about 7 or 8 years. Hockey, again, it goes all the way through 20U, so there are more years on this than other sports. Typically, the lower end average is going to be 72,000, right? So if you're paying that pay to play tier 3, you might be paying upwards of like $12, $13, $14, $15,000 a season once you're, 17, 18, 19, 20. And that's not including like you as a parent to travel with them or any of that stuff. Now like junior hockey is a little bit more all inclusive when you talk about like the cost, but there are other costs like billeting, travel, like for you as a parent, your kid coming home for Christmas, all that stuff, all that gets factored in. The upper end is $414,000. That is a lot of money for your child to play a game up until they go to college, right? And we're going to talk about why this matters in a minute. Tennis, the lower end average, $87,500. The upper end average is $322,500. Now, the reason why there's a discrepancy there, again, because tennis, you would typically just go off and go to college at 18, whereas with hockey, you would go off and possibly go when you're 20, 21 years old, depending on how long you play junior hockey or if you do play junior hockey. So as you can see, families spend a lot of cash, right? It is not cheap to play these sports and to play them at a quote-unquote high level. Next thing we're going to talk about is kind of the promise and like the outcomes. All right, so what's the promise here, right? What are the pain points that coaches push on to get parents to open their wallets? College scholarship is number one. That's like the number one dream and aspiration of the vast majority of kids that play. Also being a pro. I feel like a lot of these kids, as they get older, they kind of start to understand that like becoming a pro like might not be in the cards for them. But college is always there. That's always something that they want to do. Another big pain point from coaches is your child being left behind. If they don't play for this team now, they're going to get left behind everybody else. So pay up 20 grand so your kid doesn't get left behind, right? The reality of it is that's not how that happens. That's not how that works. Kids don't have to play to, and we'll talk about this in a little bit too. Kids don't have to play and perform at a high level. They need to train and practice at a high level. And that's a big difference when it comes to a lot of these summer showcases and spring hockey and off-season like playing and stuff like that. It's all stupid and nonsense. So there's a study from 2022 that showed 54% of parents believe that their child will play sports in college. Okay, and we'll come back to that in a minute. And it gets even worse. Right, so in 2015, there was a study that showed 26% of parents believe their child would become a professional athlete. That's 26% of parents think that. That is over 1/4 of all parents think their kids have a shot at becoming a professional athlete. Now, I have a daughter, and I think she's amazing, but I cannot imagine being so deluded that I think at age 12 she's going to be destined to play a college sport. There's so many things that can happen between like 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and college. That's a wild stat to me. But it gets even worse when you talk about fathers. When polled, that same study showed that 40% of fathers believe their children will play will play professional sports. All right. So wild. That's crazy. So 54% of parents believe their children are going to play in college. The reality is that 7% on average of high school athletes make it to the NCAA level, right? And we're not talking about like NAIA or ACHA or AAU or any of that stuff. It's great to play those. Like, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that being kind of like the end of the road for you. There's great athletes that play those sports. I myself finished my playing career playing club hockey in the ACHA. It was great. I loved it. But let's be honest, that's not the goal for the vast majority of kids. The goal is Division I NCAA or NCAA period, right? It's about 7% of those kids will make it to the NCAA. When we talk about pros, right, the amount of kids playing in high school, right, who will make it to the professional or like Olympic level for any sport, this is all sports combined, is about 0.03%. So 0.03% of kids who are playing a sport in high school will ever receive a paycheck to play that sport, right? So we've got 40% of dads and 26% of parents overall thinking that their kid's going to do that when the reality is 0.03%. I'm going to say it again, 0.03% of high school athletes will ever collect a paycheck to continue playing that sport, all right? So, I think in a previous episode, I talked about how many kids actually end up on a full ride. If you haven't seen that one, basically there's about 520,000 NCAA athletes, and about 5,000 of them are on a full ride. Now, we talk about these full rides. The vast majority of these full rides are basketball and football. Your average baseball player is getting a partial scholarship. Your average hockey player is getting a partial scholarship. When it comes to women's sports, it's a little bit different. The odds are a little bit more in your favor. But if you've got a young son who's playing football, right, and you're all in and you think a college scholarship is coming, I need you to take a step back and look at the entirety of it. And that doesn't mean that your kid's not an amazing athlete. It's the odds are just not very good that they're going to get to go to college for like absolutely free. And when you go back earlier to the numbers that we were looking at, we're talking about spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, right, for your kid to have a shot at going to school and being on scholarship. Like, the math just doesn't math, right? 7% of kids will end up in the NCAA. Like, 1% of the overall like body of NCAA athletes end up with a full ride, right? So that's just the math. That is like how it works. There's no way around it. So the odds of you getting through high school and spending this money, like these tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars, and being rewarded with a pro contract or like a college scholarship on the back, college scholarship or professional trial on the back end, are very small. And I'm going to say this again, that doesn't mean that like you should not dream big, like real big, and reach for the stars. It just means that we need to be realistic if we're a family who is struggling to get by, to shell out more and more cash for like our kid to get that college scholarship or become a pro, because it's more than likely not going to happen. When my daughter asks me when she's like 5 or 6 years old if she's going to play in the Olympics one day, I'm going to tell her, hell yeah, absolutely. But are we going to shell out $20,000 a year for her to play softball or soccer or hockey or basketball? Absolutely the hell not. Because it's just, it is what it is. They need to spend that time at a younger age developing and having fun and making relationships and all the things that sports give us without the pressure of being a pro. And that's kind of what leads me to my next thing. Like, these kids aren't pros. Like, we have these organizations that treat them like pros, that you have to be dedicated. You can't miss practice for anything. Dude, I missed my senior prom. I missed my senior homecoming. What else did I miss? I missed like high school playoff games to play like AA hockey in Florida because I had to be all in, right? And that's insane. Like, looking back at it, like, I really don't care that I didn't go to prom. But, you know, like, it kind of sucked not being able to be around my buddies and stuff because I had to be dedicated to the sport that got me all the way to NCAA Division III hockey and club hockey, and now made me a strength coach. You it's wild, and it's only gotten worse since, man. That was back in 2003. That was 22 years ago. Some of these kids I know now, like, they're not allowed to go trick-or-treating because they have practice. Like, how wild is that? Imagine being 11 years old. You can't trick-or-treat because you got to be dedicated to this single A or double A hockey team or low-level club volleyball team or Pop Warner football team, whatever the hell it is. Like, it's wild. Like, that is nuts to me because these kids are not pros. They should not be dedicated like pros. They should not be practicing and playing, training, or thinking like pros. Hell, I've got kids that are like 12U hockey that that train here at the Lions Den, and it's like a battle working around games for them because they don't need to be fresh. Like I tell their parents, I do not care if your kids are fresh. They just can't be so fatigued that they're going to get hurt. But we got to work around these 60 plus game schedules for 12-year-olds. That is absolutely insane because there is no development that happens when you're playing because there's entirely too much pressure, right? The reason at the NHL level, the NFL level, at the WNBA, the PWHL, all that, they play 60, 70, 80 plus games, right? MLB 160 something is because it's entertainment value. They are a business, right? They're not developing. They have to go out and showcase their skills so the owners can make money. That's what it's about. It's not about developing. So when you take these kids and you put them on a professional like schedule when it comes to playing games, it absolutely crushes their spirit when it comes to development because there's entirely too much pressure, right? There's no freedom to be what's the word I'm looking for? There's no freedom to be imaginative. there's no creative. Damn it, there it is. There's no freedom to be creative for these kids because if I'm creative and I fuck up, like boom, they're going the other way. I'm going to get yelled at by my coach. I might even get sat, right? So how the hell is any of that development? Like it's not. These kids need more practice. They need more training time. They need more time off the field to play, developing as an athlete, and they need less games. But here's the thing, parents. The reason there are so many games is because of you, because you asked for it. The market demanded this, and now these organizations are like, all right, here we go, pro-type schedule, 80 games for little Johnny at 13 years old, right? And then you wonder why at 15 the kid doesn't want to play anymore because it's not fun. It's not fun to be a professional. Dude, I know professional athletes that I've worked with in the past that hate their sport. They just play it because they're good at it and they make money. Like, they've hated it for a long time. Like, I had a guy who, I won't say his name, he's a professional baseball player. He was out for like 2 years with a concussion, and he wasn't all that concussed. He was part of the crop of guys that was going to see that neurologist up in Pittsburgh. I think there was Sidney Crosby was one of them. There's one other guy, and he would go up there, and then he'd come back, and he'd have all these symptoms, and he'd be like, "Yeah, I just don't think I'm ready to go back yet." And it was 2 years of him getting paid to not play baseball, and I'm convinced the reason is because he hated baseball. He was just very good at it, and it got him the lifestyle that he wanted to have, and he figured if I can be hurt, so just to paint this picture. He got the concussion by tapping himself in the helmet with his bat, right? And that took him out for 2 years. He's, $5.5 million paycheck to not play baseball. Here we go. But it's these kids will grow up and they'll be burnt out. And in addition to that, like, they're not just burnt out. They're not developing and getting where they want to go, right? So this American youth sports business model that we currently have in place, it is making it less likely that you're going to make it to the highest levels, and not even just because of burnout, but because your skill set's going to plateau because you never spent the time learning other movement skill and becoming an athlete. So when all the other kids get bigger and faster and stronger, you're going to be left in the dust. And it happens at my gym all the time. I get these kids that are like 15, 16, 17, 18. I had a kid who was eligible for the draft. It was his first time being in like a legitimate training environment, right? He lucked out because he's just a phenomenal player. But like, it's almost too late at that point because we've done all this skill. And then on the back end, oh man, I'm not fast enough or strong enough anymore. I have to go do that. When the reality is we should have done that from the very beginning at 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. We should have been getting stronger and faster and moving better, right? So that when you do start to specialize at like 16, 17, 18, which in my opinion is still too early, but when you do that, you can hit the ground running because you're already fast, you're already strong, you're already powerful, you're already mobile, you're already resilient, you're all of these things, and that's going to amplify the skill sets that you create out on the field of play, whatever sport it is that you play. So at this point, man, I'm not remembering where I was going with that. I just kind of went off on a rant there. There's a couple other things I want to touch on before we go ahead and shut this down. So to wrap that up, you're spending all this money, like hundreds of thousands of dollars potentially, on a dream that just the math doesn't math on, right? And you're worried that your kid's going to get left behind. And I can tell you from personal experience as a late bloomer in the game of hockey, I spent the time like training off the ice. And the reason for it is I was always like a shorter guy, and I figured I couldn't grow taller, so maybe I could become faster and bigger, right? I spent a lot of time developing off the ice so that when I did finally hit my stride at like 16, 17, 18U, like I was able to because I was strong. I was resilient. I didn't get hurt. Like all these things. And it was because I didn't just play hockey. I trained off the ice. I played basketball. I played baseball. I did gymnastics. I was a high school cheerleader, right? So I did everything, and that paid dividends for me down the road where like I never got hurt. I never had issues. I developed and I hit my peak when I was supposed to, and that led to me going on to play in the NCAA, as a hockey player. All right, so a couple more things before we close this off. It's weird. I can see myself in the screen. I get red because I get pretty heated about this kind of thing. So if you're just tuning in now, I'm red because I've been like scroll back. It's interesting. So the things that we do for our kids, right? So what you're doing when your kid is treated like a pro at a very young age, and I'm not talking about like with money and all that stuff. I'm talking about like practices, schedules, game schedules, training schedules, all of that year round, right? You're setting them up to have main character syndrome, right? Because this child is determining if and when you eat dinner as a family. They're determining like what you do on the weekends. They're determining what you do every single night of the week. They're determining if you ever get to go on vacation as a family, right? They're determining all these things by the simple fact that they're playing a sport. And I think that's a horrible thing. Not to mention, like, think you've got like a sibling. How many times have you seen the sibling that is always at the fields or at the basketball court or at the hockey rink, right? Doesn't play the sport, but they're there every single time without fail, practice or games. What happens to that kid, right? That kid probably hates their sibling because they never get to do anything they want to do. They're stuck, at a sporting event, practice even for 12U. Who the hell wants to watch that? Like, I love kids, but like that's not fun to watch. Like who wants to do that? Like, I can guarantee you, if you're a parent and you've got two kids and only one of them plays sports and you are all in on that sport, like you need to spend a little bit more time with your other child and have them like be able to do some of the things that they want to do because they are feeling left out and they are feeling a little bit resentful and it will manifest in some bad ways down the road. I'm pretty sure it happened in my family when it came to my sister. And I don't think that was because we were always doing what I wanted to do. My parents kind of like, my dad took me to go do things. My mom, took my sister to go do things. But like there can be some animosity there, and that can be bad for relationships for the rest of their lives, in addition to your child thinking that they're the most important thing because you made them the most important thing. Side note here, your kids are important, but they're not the most important thing. Your relationship with your spouse is 100%, because without that relationship, your kids' futures don't matter, right? So take care of that first, then take care of your kids. Going back to the money thing, though, it was a Lending Tree from 2022. A Lending Tree survey found that 33% of families take on debt for their child to play sports, right? So not only are we spending this insane amount of money, not only are we possibly like harming our kids physically, not only are we harming our kids emotionally and mentally, and we'll go into that in a second here, not only are we possibly like creating animosity and rifts within the family, right? We're taking on debt. A household with a lot of debt is a very hectic and chaotic household, right? So 33% of families, and then 59% of families said that their child's sport causes serious financial strain on the family. 59%, not 59% of that 33%, 59% of all families who play sports, right? So the overwhelming majority of families believe that their child playing a sport is bad for their family's finances, but we continue to do it, and 33% of those families actually take on debt and make their families like financial position even worse, right? At best, for a 0.03% chance to play pro sports, at best for a 7% chance to play at the NCAA level, at best for a significantly less than 1% chance to receive a full ride to do so, right? So the last thing that I kind of want to talk about here is the anxiety and depression that these young kids are feeling, right? So social media is playing a huge role in that. But when polled at the NCAA level, athletes playing sports in college suffer from anxiety and depression at a significantly higher rate than those who don't, right? And that's because of the pressure. There's so much pressure on these athletes. You hear, about these young girls. There's a soccer player, I think it was 2 years ago, like took her own life. There's a local young hockey player here. She took her own life. It happens because there is so much pressure on these kids. Like, if you don't think your kids feel that financial strain, like you're fooling yourself, right? If you don't think that your kid thinks that like they're the problem when it comes to you and your spouse fighting and they can hear, right? And you're fighting about money. Like, they know these things. They're not stupid. It's not good, from that perspective. So to take on debt and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars for a very small chance that something is going to go the way that you want it to go, to me, like it's sad, and it's like bad for families, and it's really, it's bad for these kids too. All right, so the last part of this, and a lot more I want to talk about, but this is getting really long already. Maybe I'll do a part 2, is the physical damage it does to your child to play a sport year round and specialize in just that sport. All the data we have shows they are more likely to end up with overuse injuries, like injuries typically seen in like geriatric populations, like, and we're talking about kids in their teens, right? So Tommy John, the average age for Tommy John surgery now is 15 and a half years old. That's insane, right? That's insane. It's ACL tears with young athletes. A lot of that's overuse stuff. A lot of that's like lack of strength stuff, but a lot of that's overuse stuff. All the tendinitises, the jumper's knee, the runner's knees, all those things, right? They're all caused a thoracic outlet. I had a kid who had exertional thoracic outlet, right? These things, like, they come with sports specialization and playing year round and never taking a break from the sport, right? So if we know it's significantly more expensive to play a sport year round, right? We know it's more likely to make your child anxious and depressed. We know it's more likely to cause financial strain on your family. We know the outcomes are not like in anyone's favor unless you're an absolute genetic freak, right? At 0.03% making it to professional sports and 7% making it to the NCAA level. Like, we know all these things, right? In addition to that, we know they're more than likely going to get hurt from something that's incredibly preventable because they are playing this sport. The worst, like the worst offenders here tend to be tennis, hockey, baseball. Those three have like very unique movement skills on the field that really aren't replicated in a lot of other places. So to repeat those efforts over and over again and get nothing else outside of that, right, that becomes an issue. And that is when we deal with, even like labrum tears in the hips and the shoulders, ACL tears, all these various tendinitises that we end up having, sometimes misaligned hips and spine issues, Tommy John surgery from UCL tears. We know all these things. So why is it that we continue to dump all of our time, energy, effort, and money into these sports, right? I don't know. I don't have the answer. A lot of it's because, like, that's the only way to do it now, right? You can't just be half in. You've got to be all in with a sports organization, right? You can't just play rec if you're like any good. You're stuck going off to the travel and club levels. You have to if you want to keep playing the sport. There's nowhere for you to go, right? We don't have these city-run leagues anymore. We have these crazy state-of-the-art facilities that are enormous, right? And they all have to be paid down. Those things all cost money. In order for them to make money, they have to they have to get you out there as often as possible. And that's like leading to terrible outcomes in hockey. We have this, everybody's complaining about it right now. There's an asset manager that's really gotten into hockey. They're called Black Bear, and they keep buying up entire cities worth of rinks, right? And then pushing everybody out and jacking up the prices, and it's boxing everybody out of hockey. I'm sure that's going on in other sports, like very similarly, because they're seeing the dollar signs when it comes to youth sports, right? $12 billion a year. That's a lot of money, and it's relatively easy money because I don't have to sell you. Like, you already want your kid to play. 40% of the men think their kids are going to play pro sports. 26% of parents think their kids are going to play pro sports. 54% of parents think their kids are going to play at the NCAA level, right? Typically Division I, you're not asking parents, hey, is your kid going to play Division III? Not usually. They're thinking Division I. That's where the dream is, right? So I don't have to sell you on it. It's just there, right? I can hire all these former athletes who like need something to do to stay involved in the sport, and they can sell you on their training, and bada bing, bada boom. We've got a thriving business, right? It's just, it doesn't pan out, and it's not leading to better outcomes when it comes to families, to kids, to the sport in general. Like those asset managers purchasing, organizations is awful for the sport, man. Like, it's terrible. It's bad. It sucks. It really does. So I'm gonna shut it down there. I had a couple edits here, so this clock only shows about 5 minutes, but I think I've been talking for a little over a half hour here. Hope everybody learned something. Think twice. I don't mean, like, this isn't to shit on anybody's goals and hopes and dreams and aspirations. If you're a parent who can afford it and it's not putting financial strain on your family, and you're just happy that your kid is active, getting involved with like a group of friends, learning to be part of a team, all those things, then awesome, dude. Like, go all in, have at it. But I think it's unfair to expect these families who, over 50%, I saw a stat, like 3/4 of families are thinking about quitting sports because they can no longer afford it. We've reached that tipping point where it's no longer beneficial, and it's pricing kids out of playing sports in general. And I think we've jumped the shark, and we need to reel it in a little bit. All right. So that's it. I'll say it again. I know I did it at the beginning. Go buy a book, Total Hockey Training, Simple Strength. Great review from Mike Hedleski. I told him I'm going to print it and put it on my wall. The Dynamic Effort Method for Athletes. Check out. It'll be coming probably in a few weeks. I'm still like scheduling everything. The Great Strength Debate. I think it's going to be a great podcast. Hopefully we'll be able to get some differing opinions. I have a feeling in the beginning it's going to be me agreeing with a bunch of my buddies. But hopefully down the road we'll be able to get some people who disagree, and we can have some real conversations. Keep watching Strength Coach Rants. Like, subscribe, like, share, do all the things. Go follow us on Spotify and Apple Music or Apple Podcasts. Listen to us there. We're available. You don't get the video on Apple Podcasts, but you don't really need it for most of these episodes. And I think that's it, man. I hope everybody has a good rest of your week. It's Monday. We got out of this cold snap here in Tampa, so it was like 75. It was like 30 the other day. It's beautiful outside. Go outside, enjoy the sun, and we'll see you next time.
I don't want to hear you